December 22, 1944. Oberst Friedrich von der Heide sat in a frozen farmhouse near Bastogne, reading intelligence reports by candlelight. Something impossible was appearing in the pattern. The American Third Army was moving at speeds that violated every principle of military logistics. Von der Heide had commanded paratroopers since Crete. He understood exhaustion, understood the friction of war, understood what human bodies could and couldn't do. But this didn't make sense. The intercepts were precise. Radio operators tracked American headquarters transmissions around the clock. 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., the same voice signature, the same commander. General George Patton wasn't sleeping, or rather he was sleeping in bursts no German field manual acknowledged as humanly sustainable. 4 hours, sometimes 3. So von der Heide circled a notation on his map. Third Army had pivoted 90 degrees north, moved 133,000 men, redirected supply columns and launched attacks, all in 48 hours. The staff calculations were clear. Impossible without continuous command presence. The Oberst wrote in his journal, "We are not fighting an army. We are fighting a man who has defeated sleep itself." The pattern had emerged weeks earlier during Third Army's drive across France. German signals intelligence documented something peculiar about American radio traffic. Most Allied headquarters went silent between midnight and 0600 hours. Standard procedure. Commanders needed rest. Staff rotations handled overnight operations. Patton's headquarters was different. Hauptmann Klaus Becker, signals officer for Wehrmacht Army Group G, kept meticulous logs. From August through November 1944, he tracked transmission patterns from Third Army's mobile command posts. The data was unmistakable. Patton's command frequency remained active 20 hours per day. Not different voices. Staff rotations would show different authentication protocols. The same command authority, the same operational tempo maintained from 0400 hours until past midnight. Becker's report to General Oberst Johannes Blaskowitz included calculations. If Patton was personally directing operations during these hours, he was sleeping at most 4 hours per night, possibly less. The Wehrmacht Medical Corps was consulted. Their assessment, such a schedule was maintainable for perhaps 3 days before cognitive deterioration. After a week, command decisions would become erratic, dangerous. The Third Army had been operational for 90 consecutive days. "Either the Americans have developed stimulants we don't know about," Becker wrote, "or Patton is physiologically different from normal men." The German staff dismissed it. Men were men. Biology was biology. Sleep deprivation was a weapon they could exploit. They were tracking a commander spiraling toward breakdown. They were wrong. The Wehrmacht had refined the art of fighting exhausted enemies. In Russia, in Africa, in France, German commanders learned to recognize the signs. Delayed responses to tactical developments, confused orders, contradictory directives, units left unsupported because headquarters missed a developing crisis. Sleep deprivation was the invisible ally. After 2 weeks of sustained operations, even elite formations began making mistakes. Commanders started prioritizing sleep over advantage. Opportunities went unexploited because the general was unconscious when the window opened. This was doctrine, this was proven, this was reliable, but Patton wasn't following the script. General Major Hans von Obstfelder commanded German First Army facing Third Army in Lorraine during November 1944. His intelligence staff compiled what they called the Patton Paradox file. The pattern was consistent and wrong. Third Army attacked at dawn on November 8th, and November 9th, and November 10th. 12 consecutive days of pre-dawn attacks, each precisely coordinated, each exploiting the previous day's gains. Von Obstfelder's own headquarters was operating on rotating shifts. His staff colonels managed operations in turns. Ensuring someone rested was always making decisions. Standard practice, sustainable practice. The American intercepts showed no such rotation. Patton was in his command post at 0400 hours when attacks launched. Still there at 1300 hours when breakthroughs needed exploitation. Still there at 2200 hours, issuing orders for the next day's operations. "It's the amphetamines," von Obstfelder's medical officer insisted. "Pervitin. The Americans must have their own version." But the decision quality wasn't deteriorating. The mistakes weren't accumulating. The operations were getting sharper, faster, more aggressive. Something was sustaining Patton that the Wehrmacht didn't understand, and they were paying for it in blood and miles. After the war, in the quiet of defeat, German officers tried to understand what they'd faced. Major General F.W. von Mellenthin, who served as chief of staff to multiple panzer armies, spent hours interviewing American officers. One conversation haunted him. How did Patton maintain operational tempo? The American lieutenant colonel, 3rd Army staff, laughed. He slept 4 hours, sometimes less, every night, for months. That's not possible. We have the logs. He went to bed between midnight and 0100 hours, woke at 0500 hours, every day, no exceptions, no variation. Von Mellenthin pressed. The medical consequences. There were none. Or rather, the consequences were tactical. He was present for every crisis. He made decisions when our opponents were asleep or delegating to subordinate staff. He didn't just maintain tempo. He accelerated it deliberately, knowing we couldn't match it. The logs confirmed what von Mellenthin didn't want to believe. On December 19, 1944, Eisenhower called a meeting at Verdun. The Ardennes offensive had shattered American lines. German panzers were driving west. Eisenhower needed 3rd Army to disengage from its offensive in the Saar, pivot 90 degrees north, and counterattack toward Bastogne. The other generals at the meeting asked for timelines, days, planning, logistics. Patton's response is documented in multiple sources. On December 22nd, 3 divisions. Eisenhower thought he was joking. Bradley thought he was grandstanding. The movement Patton described required precise coordination of 133,000 men, 62,000 vehicles, and complete redirection of supply chains in 72 hours, while maintaining defensive positions in the Saar. In winter weather, the Germans thought he was bluffing. At 0400 hours on December 20th, Patton was in his command post, personally directing the pivot. His staff had worked through the night preparing movement orders. But the critical decisions, which units moved first, which roads carried priority traffic, how to sequence artillery displacements, these came from Patton directly. At 1600 hours that same day, he was visiting forward units, ensuring commanders understood the mission. At 2300 hours, he was reviewing logistics reports, identifying bottlenecks before they became catastrophic. At 0430 hours on December 21st, he was back in the command post when the first units encountered unexpected resistance. The preset plan called for a specific route. Patton looked at the map, calculated terrain and enemy positions, and rerouted the advance within minutes. The decision saved hours. At 0600 hours on December 22nd, exactly 72 hours after Eisenhower's meeting, Patton's 4th Armored Division attacked toward Bastogne. General Major Heinz Kokott, commanding the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, blocking Bastogne's relief, couldn't understand it. His intelligence staff had tracked 3rd Army's positions on December 19th. They were 100 miles south, engaged in active offensive operations. The logistics alone, fuel, ammunition, maintenance, made a 3-day redeployment impossible. "They can't be here," Kokott told his staff on December 22nd. But they were. and they were attacking with precision that suggested full reconnaissance, complete planning, perfect coordination, the kind of preparation that should take weeks. So Kokot's after-action report noted, enemy attacks showed no signs of hasty preparation or exhausted troops. Coordination between armor, infantry, and artillery was exemplary. Command decisions were rapid and tactically sound. At 16:45 hours on December 26th, 4th Armored Division broke through to Bastogne. In those 7 days, from Eisenhower's meeting to Bastogne's relief, Patton averaged 4 hours of sleep per night. His staff kept detailed logs because they were afraid he would collapse. Medical officers monitored him for signs of exhaustion-induced mental degradation. They found none. His decision-making remained sharp. His tactical instincts remained sound. His presence remained constant. Years later, von Mellenthin wrote, "We calculated that American commanders needed 8 hours of sleep to maintain effectiveness. We planned our operations around the assumption that between 2,200 and 0600 hours, American headquarters would be running on staff officers, not commanders." Patton broke that assumption. He was always there, always deciding, always attacking. We were fighting a man who had weaponized sleeplessness. March 1945, the Rhine crossings. This was where German doctrine said Patton had to break. Third Army had been in continuous combat for 7 months. From the beaches of Normandy to the German border, the physiological debt should be catastrophic. No humans sustained 4-hour sleep schedules for 210 consecutive days. The Wehrmacht medical assessment was unanimous. Patton would make a critical error. The exhaustion would manifest as strategic blindness, tactical oversight, operational paralysis. The General der Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding 5th Panzer Army, built his defensive strategy around this certainty. The Rhine was Germany's last natural barrier. Crossing required meticulous planning, bridging equipment, air superiority, logistics. The kind of complex operation where exhausted commanders made fatal mistakes. Von Manteuffel positioned his forces to exploit the expected American confusion. He anticipated Patton would rush the crossing, would miss defensive preparations, would create a vulnerable bridgehead that German counterattacks could destroy. On the night of March the 22nd, elements of 3rd Army's 5th Infantry Division crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim. No preliminary bombardment, no air preparation. Assault boats, darkness, surprise. Von Manteuffel's headquarters received reports at 0200 hours. Impossible. No commander launched major river crossings in the middle of the night without extensive preparation. This had to be a reconnaissance raid, maybe a feint. At 600 hours, Patton was personally at the crossing site, directing engineer battalions as they began constructing bridges. At 1100 hours, he called Bradley, "We're across." Von Manteuffel ordered immediate counterattacks. His panzers moved toward Oppenheim, expecting to find a small American bridgehead, disorganized, vulnerable. Instead, they encountered 6 battalions with anti-tank guns already positioned, artillery already registered, and commanders who knew exactly where German counterattacks would develop, because Patton had been there. At 0200 hours when the crossing began, at 0400 hours when the bridgehead expanded, so at 600 hours when defensive positions were set, at 800 hours when German counterattacks were predicted and planned for. The bridgehead held. Within 48 hours, 3rd Army had 3 divisions across the Rhine. Von Manteuffel's counterattacks failed with devastating losses. The Americans weren't disorganized. They weren't confused. They weren't exhausted. Von Manteuffel's chief of staff wrote in his diary, "We planned for human commanders operating under human limitations. Patton isn't operating under those limitations. He's present at 0200 hours giving orders. present at 1400 hours directing exploitation, present at 2200 hours planning tomorrow. He doesn't sleep like a man. He sleeps like a machine scheduling maintenance. The Rhine crossing succeeded because Patton was there when German doctrine said no commander could be. 4 hours of sleep, 7 months of combat, no degradation. The numbers proved what German doctrine denied. From August 1st, 1944 to May 8th, 1945, Third Army was operational for 281 days. Intelligence logs documented Patton's sleep patterns for 247 of those days. Average, 4.1 hours per night. The longest sleep, 7 hours once, when hospitalized with a minor illness. The shortest, 90 minutes during the Ardennes counteroffensive. Third Army covered 600 miles from Normandy to Czechoslovakia, liberated 81,000 square miles of territory, captured 956,000 enemy soldiers, suffered 136,865 casualties while inflicting 1,443,888. The operational tempo averaged 2.1 miles per day, sustained for 9 months. German units facing Third Army showed characteristic signs of fighting exhausted opponents. Except the exhaustion was theirs, but not Patton's. Wehrmacht after-action reports repeatedly note enemy maintained pressure despite expected deterioration of command effectiveness. General Oberst Alfred Jodl, in his interrogation after Germany's surrender, was asked about Allied commanders. When Patton's name came up, Jodl's response was precise. He fought like he had 30 hours in his day. We couldn't match his operational tempo because our commanders were human. They needed rest. Patton apparently didn't. Third Army's staff officers provided the mechanism in post-war interviews. Patton's 4-hour sleep wasn't scattered throughout the day. It was scheduled, disciplined, inviolate. Midnight to 0400 hours, or 0100 to 0500 hours, every night. No exceptions unless tactical crises demanded presence. But the preparation was equally disciplined. Before sleeping, Patton reviewed everything: operations, intelligence, logistics. He gave clear guidance to staff for overnight contingencies. When he woke, he received briefings covering the 4 hours he'd been absent. The system was designed to compress a full command cycle into 20 operational hours. Colonel Robert Allen, 3rd Army Staff Officer, explained, "We thought the 4-hour schedule would kill him. Instead, it became a tactical weapon. Enemy commanders planned around our headquarters being non-responsive at night. But Patton was only asleep from 100 to 500. He was available for crisis decisions at 2300 hours. At 600 hours, we could launch attacks at dawn because he'd already made the decisions while enemy commanders were still sleeping." The lesson the Germans learned too late: operational tempo is a weapon. Not speed for speed's sake, not recklessness, but sustained, relentless pressure that denies the enemy time to recover, reorganize, or respond. Tempo that exploits human limitations, the need for sleep, for rest, for time to think. Patton weaponized his own physiology. 4 hours wasn't a personality quirk. It was a calculated tactical advantage. Every hour his opponent spent sleeping was an hour he spent planning, deciding, attacking. Multiply that advantage over weeks and months, and it became insurmountable. Von Mellenthin wrote in his memoir, Panzer Battles, published in 1956, "We fought Patton conventionally. We assumed he would exhaust himself. We planned operations around the assumption that all commanders needed rest. He turned that assumption into our vulnerability. While we slept, he attacked. While we rested, he exploited. While we planned, he was already executing." The principle extends beyond military operations. In any competitive endeavor, the person who can maintain high-quality decision-making on less recovery time has a compounding advantage. Not permanently, human biology eventually demands payment. But for critical periods, for decisive campaigns, the willingness to trade sleep for operational advantage can be catastrophic to opponents who assume everyone operates under the same constraints. Patton's 4-hour schedule wasn't inhuman endurance. It was disciplined prioritization, and it terrified his staff because they understood what the Germans learned too late. They were working for a commander who had decided sleep was negotiable and winning wasn't. Doctrine couldn't account for that.